The nonpartisan Wisconsin Policy Forum released a brief last week cautioning state lawmakers when writing the next state budget.
It suggests that the state could be nearing a dramatic turn in its fortunes after Governor Evers introduced a vast budget proposal last month. Earlier today, we talked with Tyler Burns from the Wisconsin Policy Forum about what's at stake. Okay, well, Tyler, the governor's budget proposal would increase spending by about 19% to fund things like K through 12 education and other priorities. But the state is going into this budget with a pretty sizable surplus and a rainy day fund. So what is the caution that the Wisconsin Policy Forum is putting forward regarding this budget?
So we have this, I think we discussed it as like a once in a lifetime state reserve, $4 billion, that's a lot of money. What we're cautioning about is, we don't want to get to the point where we spend so much or cut taxes so much that instead of having a surplus available to fund priorities, whether it's property tax relief or K-12, but instead we go back to the days of the early 2010s where we're trying to just find enough revenue to keep the lights on before we even start talking about how do we pay for any state priorities. And this governor's budget, what we do here is we see this, as you say, about 20% increase across all funds. It also includes just over $2.4 billion in tax increases. And so we wind up bringing in about, over the 2-year period, about $4 billion less than we spend. And so looking forward to the next budget, we're already behind before we even start, again, adjusting things, paying for state priorities, those sorts of things.
And beyond all that, are there any other parts of the governor's budget that could contribute to a potential shortfall that you're keeping an eye on? So,
the biggest areas of spending increases that we found were K-12. That's going to jump over the 2-year period about $3.4 billion. University is going to get about $700 million. And so, those are kind of two of the bigger drivers on the spending side. They also dedicate just over $1 billion towards property tax relief through K-12 aid and through aid to local governments. And so those are really the big spending increases that are on an ongoing basis.
You mentioned the lean years around the 2000s, around the pandemic era. A lot of lawmakers that are currently in the legislature were not elected at that point. So they're kind of approaching it with a different mindset. Do you think any of the uncertainty on the federal level about federal funds that might be available could impact this budget?
That's really tough to say. I think uncertainty is the right word. If you look at where we'd be more vulnerable to disruptions in federal payments, you have to look at Department of Health Services, number one. That's where Medicaid and where food share are that money's spent, and they get more than double the amount of federal money as any other agency, and it makes up about half of their total agency budget. So if we were to sort of have a disruption in federal funding coming in, disruption to Medicaid, disruption to food share, we couldn't continue having those programs function. The university is also relatively vulnerable. They get over $3 billion over a 2-year period, makes up a substantial share of the budget, but less than Department of Health Services. The other place where we'd want to be careful, and again, thinking back to 2009, some of the bad budgets in 2011, 13, bad budgets where there wasn't as much revenue growth. That was coming out of the Great Recession, and at this point, it seems like the economy is maybe a little bit less certain. The outlook is a little bit less positive today than it was, 6 months ago. And so the potential for slowing economic growth, that could lead to lower revenue collections, which that's again how you get into these positions where you have a deficit, where you don't collect as much revenue as you expect.
Well, it has a long way to go. It's right at the beginning stage. We'll continue to follow it closely as it moves through the legislature, Tyler, and hopefully we'll have you back as the story develops. Tyler Burns, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Great talking to you today.